And joining us now in studio, Chris Lewis, Commissioner of the Ontario Provincial Police. Commissioner, it's good to have you in that chair. Thanks so much.
Good to be here, Steve. Thank you.
We just want to remind our viewers that if you're watching us at 8 p.m., our producers are hosting a live chat at the homepage for our program. That's the agenda.tvo.org. So chime in on the live chat or send us a tweet. Use the hashtag #TheAgenda and join the conversation. Get comfy for a second because I'm actually just going to go through some of the bullet points here of this Bill C-30 that so many people have been discussing. Bill C-30 in brief would update current laws that allow the police to wiretap phones and ask telecom companies for customer information. Telecom companies would have to install equipment to intercept customer communications. Telecoms would have to provide the police, or CSIS, that's the Canadian Security and Intelligence Service, and the Competition Bureau with basic subscriber information on request without a warrant. Would allow judges also to issue multiple wiretap warrants at once. That's all from the government's background papers. Let's start from first principles. Why do you think the police need these new powers?
Well, first of all, some of those powers already exist. The ability to
Not for telecom, though.
No, but to wiretap phones, we've had that authority forever.
Right.
What's really changed here, and what seems to get missed in some of the media reports and through some people's advocacy, sorry, I had a hard time with that word today, is the fact that the only thing that's changing is our ability to get subscriber information in a world where the technology has changed.
Is that a big deal?
Well, it is, because the present legislation was drafted before we had computers, before we had cellular phones. It was drafted in the 70s. We had dial phones, and some of the viewers won't even remember those days. But the world has changed, and criminals are using the technology to their advantage. So we need the ability to catch up and have the legislative tools to get access to information, not to monitor people's conversations and emails, not to monitor people's web surfing and things they do on the web. The only thing we're asking for is, in very controlled circumstances, to be able to get the information as to who is that person that is emailing a threat, or that is emailing a little girl and trying to get her to meet him in a McDonald's restaurant.
Let me pick up on the first part of that answer first. The technological changes that you've talked about, that we now have in place that we take for granted, that of course were science fiction 40 years ago.
Right.
How has all of that technological change made police work different?
Well, it's helped us do our job. Technology is a real advantage in many ways, but it's created challenges for us, like internet crime, internet frauds, luring, child pornography. There was a time years ago when, to obtain child pornography, you had to meet somebody in a dark alley and get actually, like buying drugs, get a hand-to-hand deal. Now you can obtain it from countries away, and thousands of people can obtain it through the internet. And it's those sorts of things that we're finding very challenging to deal with from an enforcement perspective. But what hasn't been made clear is that we don't want to be able to monitor people's conversations, where they're going on websites, without a judicial order in place. The only thing we're asking for is that police be allowed to obtain subscriber information, which you can now on telephones, but you can't on internet telephones, like the voice over IP protocol, or trying to find out whose email address is that? What house is that? Because he emailed a little girl and said, I want you to meet me. So we need a place to start. And that's all we want to know is, who is that? We can find that out about license plates. We can find that out about landline telephones. Right now we can't find it out about the internet protocol stuff.
You already do arrest child pornographers.
We do.
Right.
We do.
And, listen, I don't watch the local news every single night, but there seem to be a lot of arrests on child pornography cases.
There is.
So why do you need all of these extra powers when you seem to be grabbing your fair share of that business already?
We're grabbing our fair share, but at times we're not getting the people we should. At times, a large percentage aren't even being investigated. We don't know who they are because we can't get that subscriber information. And there's cases where people are sending threats to government, threats to people, threats to private citizens, and we can't find out who that person is because the telecommunication company doesn't want to provide us the information. So if your daughter tonight, God forbid, 12 years old or whatever, has someone send her an email and say, I'd really like to meet you, I'm 14, you're really cute, I saw you at school, and you intercept that yourself and you call the police, we can't even tell you who that person is. So we don't know what door to knock on to say, hey, what are you doing? Or who to follow to see, is he going to McDonald's to meet that little girl? And while we wait months to get, or weeks or days to get the information now, maybe that person's done it to someone else.
Okay, the child porn aspects of this have, of course, captured a great deal of attention, but will these new provisions, if they get passed, help you with other kinds of things as well?
For sure.
Like what?
Senior citizens being defrauded. Email scams, where someone sends emails to a bunch of people and says, send me $5,000 and I'll send you this inheritance that you're entitled to. Or people emailing elderly ladies and saying, Grandma, I'm in jail over in Mexico, can you send me money? Where do you start? How do you know that person's in Norway or down the street from that little old lady's house?
Okay, let me come at this in another way. The University of Toronto professor Ron Diebert, who we've had on this program a few times, says the United States National Security Agency collects, this is staggering, the equivalent of the contents of the Library of Congress every 6 to 8 hours, meaning information overload to the nth degree. So the question really is, they don't have enough information, they've got way, way too much information, and how do you possibly go through all of that? Are you concerned you're going to have far too much information to comb through and it won't be any more effective than the way you are now?
No, because they're doing a bulk thing. We don't want to do that. We don't want to just say, what's Bill Smith on Main Street looking at the internet tonight? We've got information that a certain person at a certain internet address or email account is doing something. So we say, who is that? Where does that person live? And it's not just haphazardly. We have enough to do. We're overworked with the work we have now, let alone looking for work. What we're trying to do is more effectively do the work we're doing now and not violate anyone's rights. And we would never agree to legislation that violates people's rights. That's not the intent at all.
If this goes through, here's what, we're going to bring a chart up here, here's what the telecom companies would have to provide to the police: a customer's name, address, telephone number, email address, IP address, and the service provider.
That's it.
In a police investigation, how much can you do with that information?
Just for example, that I used earlier, where a little girl gets an email from someone claiming to be a friend at school, we can find out who that person is and where do they live.
And knock on their door.
We can knock on their door. Or we've had cases where that same person has emailed lots of kids. Maybe we need to put a surveillance team on that individual to make sure that he doesn't find some kid we're not even aware of. Or maybe someone is transmitting child pornography to other people and other pedophiles. At least we know who to start to look at. It may not be the person that's named. Maybe someone in that house. It may be it's in your name, but it's your 18-year-old son that's actually doing it. But at least we have a place to start. But to actually see what they're saying and what they're doing, to intercept that stuff is like a wiretap. You have to get a judicial authorization or a warrant to do it.
Well, I was just going to go there next.
Yeah.
Do you think that's the way it ought to be?
I think it is, yes.
No, do you think that's the way it ought to be? That you should have to go through a judge in order to get a search warrant to go through this?
Yes. For that additional stuff, not for that, that subscriber information. Search warrants take days, take weeks. And sometimes the time isn't allowed.
I just want to be clear here. Are you saying that you are content with the provision of the bill that would require a judge to sign off on what you want to do?
Yes, I'm content with that.
You are content with that?
Yes, quite, yeah.
Okay. Because, you know, there's people out there, obviously, who believe that you are trying to attract to yourself powers that are inconsistent with a free and democratic society.
The police chiefs of this country wouldn't tolerate that. They'd never agree to that.
Well, you say that, but, you know, you guys
Yeah.
are... I mean, you're packing right now.
Yeah, but you know what? We're bestowed powers that are way above and beyond the normal citizen.
I
And
know.
we're legislated and we're regulated and we're inspected and we're audited. In fact, this new bill provides for auditing and record keeping that we've never been responsible to do before. So we're actually asking for more controls. If you're going to give us this extra power, put controls on it, we have to report on it, and we have to keep records and be audited, and only certain people in the police department will be allowed to do it. That's different than what it is now, but it's more timely, and it'll be more coordinated, more consistent.
Those who are suspicious, though, say that if you are being obliged to audit yourself, that's not much of a check.
No, we'll have to submit reports. The whole structure for that's not established yet. We do wiretaps now. We have to submit annual reports to the Attorney General of Ontario. We'll have to do very similar things for this if it's passed. And keep records along the way. So any government agency or privacy commissioner could ask to see those records, and we'll have to show those records. And that's fine. We don't mind having those requirements whatsoever.
Bottom line, there's no need for us to be concerned about trusting you with this additional power.
Absolutely no need.
Why not?
Well, you know, the powers we have the power to take lives now. We have the authority to detain people and put them in prison and do those things. If we abuse those present authorities, then we're taken to task, and that's the way it should be. We don't want our people abusing this. We don't want our people violating people's rights. That's just not what we're about at all.
But for basic subscriber information, you won't need a judge to get that, right?
No.
You can do that on your own.
Yes.
So here we go again. I mean, is that too much power for a police officer on his or her say-so to have.
Is it then it's too much power for a police officer to see a license plate and be able to punch it into a computer and find out where the person lives, their eye color, their height, and their address. And we can do that with license plate.
That's an appropriate analogy.
Well, you know, I do.
License
It's a
plates.
comparison. I think it puts into some context, Steve, and so that we can do that now.
But that's
We could abuse that if we wanted to and use
Well,
it for something other than enforcement
I
purposes.
hear you, but if you're grabbing a guy's license plate, you're probably in public on a public street or something like that. This is different. This is potentially finding out information about somebody in their home.
Could be a license plate at somebody visiting their girlfriend's house, and we run the plate. You know, I mean, if you're going to abuse the processes, that's not right, and we need to deal with that. And we need the systems in place to make sure that's not abused either.
Fishing expeditions, you worried about those?
We don't have time for fishing expeditions. We've got so much work now, Steve. I don't think there's a police department in Canada that can say they have nothing to do. Let's go on a fishing expedition.
Is there a way to make sure that doesn't happen?
Yes, because there'll be accountabilities in this process and record keeping that's required. And if it does happen, and God forbid it may, let's face it, we have police officers that have broken the rules. We deal with that. We won't tolerate that sort of activity. So if it happens here, we'll deal with it. And we need to be very transparent about how we do that so the public has faith in what we do.
I'm guessing, Commissioner, it's safe to say that probably before long, someone's going to challenge the constitutionality of this. I mean, that's the nature of the business
That
you're
may well
in.
be, yes. And that'll be for the court to make the decision on.
So how do you think the arrests that you're going to make in the meantime are going to fare when this thing almost certainly is going to be constitutionally challenged?
You know, that's hard for me to predict. I see this as being defendable, but I'm not an expert in this, and nor am I a lawyer, and nor am I a Supreme Court justice. I just see this as a tool to help us save those little girls and those elderly people that are being abused out there in a more timely way than we are now.
Can I ask you about some of the political rhetoric that has been spilled on this? You know, there was that moment in the House of Commons when the public safety minister got up and he said, you know, either you're with us on this or you're with the child pornographers. Now that's pretty tough stuff. What do you think of that?
Well, you know what, I can't pass judgment on what he said, but I can also see the confusion that exists in the public about this and the rights that may be violated by this, because this is confusing to us. Some of the legislation, our experts that do wiretaps every day read it, and I'm talking to them and asking them questions about it, and they're still confused. So it's difficult to comprehend just by putting it out there. And so you can see how that rhetoric starts, but the bottom line is we don't want all kinds of powers to just, in a willy-nilly way, start checking to see what sites people are looking at in the internet.
No,
that just doesn't interest us. We don't have time for it.
I get that, but you know, the public safety minister of the country basically went on record in the House of Commons as saying, if you don't agree with what we're doing here and my interpretation, my Vic Taves' interpretation of this bill, you're basically in league with child pornographers. Now, does that help put a smiley face on this, which you're, I must say, doing an excellent job of doing right now?
I don't think it does. You know, the bottom line is this is confusing. We need to explain it to people so they understand that we're not out to violate their rights. And this isn't us just going to start listening to conversations and reading emails people send their kids and their girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever. That's not it. We don't want any part of that.
But when that kind of heated rhetoric gets going, though, does that not, I mean, that...
It doesn't help those that are already confused by it, for sure.
Have you been in touch with the minister on this or with his ministry on this?
No, I'm a provincial government employee, and I don't speak to the federal cabinet ministers.
If you don't have to.
I have one or two that are still friends.
Okay.
But
Different governments have been trying to update this law. We talked at the beginning of this interview about how the rules in place have gone back maybe 30 or 40 years. They've been trying to update this stuff for a long, long time. Why do you think it hasn't succeeded so far?
I don't know, really. I know that it has been for probably 20 years we've been trying to update this, and other issues around the Privacy Act legislation and wiretaps, et cetera, technology and whatnot. I think it just finally has the right ear. I mean, the Liberal government federally started all this. The Conservatives are carrying it through. The police chiefs across Canada support it, and the police chiefs across Canada don't support every law that comes out, obviously. We totally support this. We've asked for it, and we're united in the fact that this is really what we're trying to explain it to be.
If this bill had the provisions in it that you wanted, would it be tougher? In other words, has it been watered down over the years to get to the point where it's something that can get enough votes in Parliament?
No, you know, I think it's just what it should be. I mean, we're just asking for that basic subscriber information that we can get off license plates, we can get off landline phones. Now, That's all we're asking for. No more than that. It'll still require a warrant or still require judicial authorization. And I think that's fair. And I think that is, it just needs to be explained better in that way, and that's exactly why I'm here tonight.
The minister did say he was open to amendments. Would you want any amendments?
Well, I think, I mean, if it's confusing to me and confusing to our experts that know a lot more about this within the OPP and policing than I do, then something needs to be tightened up. I mean, there's all kinds of debates, what should it be called and whatnot. I don't care about that. It's kind of that basic provision piece that I think is very relative and very needed, and I think we can control it very well.
Okay. Commissioner, it's good of you to come into TVO tonight.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Steve.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.